And now Kathy is going to take charge and share with us a little bit about how she got into this topic. So what made you want to write a book about funerals?
Well, I mean, the original kind of long time ago getting into it was I started having panic attacks as a teenager. And for people who have severe panic disorder, a lot of the time they think they're dying. So as a teen, I basically thought I was dying all the time, which is, traumatic. So I thought, I'll learn about it and maybe that'll give me a little bit of control over those feelings of fear, which I think even if you've never actually felt like you're dying, you can definitely understand. A lot of people are afraid of even talking about it. So that's what got me into it, and just like a kind of amateur learning about it, doing my own research kind of thing. And then, in 2013, I wrote Funerals to Die For, which is more of a looking at kind of the weird funerals in history, cultural things. And then in 2020, in March of 2020, I was approached to write this one by the publisher Quirk, and we all know what was happening in March of 2020. So it was a very interesting experience for the next 6 months to be researching and writing about death while also, living in that time and in that moment. But I think for this particular book, why I wanted to write it is because my family kind of already does this. Like I would say we all kind of have our own book already. It wasn't as funny, it was more legal. But like I've known for years that when my parents die, I know where on their bookshelf this trust is, it's got all the information, I know who to call, everything like that. And we had the same thing when my grandmother died a few years before. Everything was planned. And even with her, with everything being planned, it turned out some things weren't planned and it was still a bit stressful. So it was just, I wanted to kind of share that with people who maybe don't have families that are weird like mine, and don't have families that will talk about at dinner, the benefits of cremation over full body burial. And because I just couldn't imagine going through an experience like losing a parent, losing a grandparent, and being the one in charge and not knowing anything. And then you have five days basically to put on what is effectively a small wedding. And so I just feel horrible for people, like for death to come suddenly and have no preparation. But since it's scary, something funny,
I think that's phenomenal that your family is so prepared, and I hope that everyone watching is maybe at least half as prepared as you. Thinking of that, is there anything unique that is in your plan or your parents' plan that you'd be able to share with us?
For mine, my parents is pretty standard. They went with cremation, and like I said, that wasn't just a random example. That literally was a dinner conversation where my father had decided he wanted cremation, but my mother was still thinking she wanted full body burial. But they also want to be together in death, so what are they going to do? So they've both gone with cremation now. But for mine, ironically enough, considering I wrote a book about it, I just want something unbelievably simple. I don't even want people to come together. I have kind of a letter that I've written that's kind of a last goodbye, and I keep it updated maybe once a year. And then I have a playlist of 3 songs that I feel kind of evoke an emotion of being sad that I'm dead. And so I want that letter to be sent to people, and they would have the playlist, and then they can kind of sit wherever they are in the world and just kind of reflect about how I'm gone and how they're super sad now.
I like that you can mourn on your own and kind of do it your own way.
Yeah.
I loved this bit in your book titled Rewarding Your Funeral Guest. And this gentleman, Dennis Valstead, decided to add a line in his will declaring that $500,000 would be split evenly between everyone who attended his funeral. And he didn't tell anybody. So after everyone attended, including the organist, including the priest, any children that were there, all received a check weeks later for $1,872, just thanking them, which I think is phenomenal. I don't think I have that, extra cash lying around, but you go into saying how, like, even if you give everyone a pizza, which is wonderful. So I'm trying to think of what I can do.
Yeah,
Everyone will
and
get a kazoo.
it doesn't have to be, you know, monetary, obviously, although that, you know, makes me want to go to some funerals, who knows. But I also was like 500,000, and then, you know, when I was researching and reading it and going, wow, how many people went to his funeral? Like, out of $500,000, $1,800 is nice, but whoa, that was a lot of people at that funeral. Yeah, but people I've talked to have said things, so I can't say that I came up with these, but like they have large book collections, and they'll be like, I'll want my books brought, or people can come and take one of my books. Some people who do pottery or other craft things, and they might have pieces at home that they don't want to give away now, but at the time it's like, okay, people can each have a piece of pottery that I've made over my life. And so those are like, you know, we get favors and everything else, funeral favors, but ones that really evoke the person, I think is great. Or cash, cold hard cash is good too. The rent-a-mourner thing is fascinating because it kind of depends on where you are in the world. Because on the one hand, it's a very culturally important thing in certain areas of the world to have a lot of people at your funeral. So having people essentially paid to show up is considered weird. It's considered what you would do because you want to have the people there. That tends to be I'm generalizing hugely, but that tends to be kind of an Asian area of the world thing, not everywhere, just some places. And then in some parts of Africa, it's more the rent-a-mourners are like almost like actors, and they're there to be very emotional, even though they probably don't know who you are, but they're very, very good at like crying on command and like pulling their hair. And that allows everyone else at the funeral to then, you know, they don't feel like they're the only one crying, you know, because you don't want to have that kind of really strong emotional response if you're the only one. And so having all those rented mourners who don't feel weird because they're being paid to do that, they are, you know, they're allowed for real grief from other people. But then of course in America it's becoming kind of there have been like places that'll do it as kind of just a thing, which we don't have that kind of cultural background, but it's pretty fun. And if you're an actor trying to get a gig, it could be cool.
In your book, you mentioned someone on Twitter mentioned that they would, if you pay them, they would stand in the distance at the cemetery with an umbrella, no matter if it's raining or not, and just be kind of mysterious. And I think I want that. So anyone in the audience, you want to sign up?
Dana Schwartz, she's an author, humorist. She's incredible. She's done some great books. She has a podcast. Totally, I don't know her personally. I just think she's amazing. But yeah, that was a viral tweet she had a couple of years ago. I'll be the mysterious stranger with the umbrella, and I'm like, yeah, that is a cool idea.
I do have to bring it up, the mushroom suit. So I was looking at, you know, different burial methods, from cremation to mummification still a thing. Was shocked to learn that. Could you go into some, you know, things that are intriguing that not a lot of people might be aware of?
Yeah, the mummification thing, it's specifically a religion slash, I won't say cult because I don't know enough about them, but it's that kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's not a mainstream thing. And so their location is in Utah, and their founder decided that mummification was going to be part, and this is, you know, in the 20th century, second half of the 20th century, decided that mummification was going to be part of their religion. And because they have this location where they can do their own mummification, he was mummified, he's passed on since, you can, I think technically it's a donation to the church. And it's quite a large donation because it turns out mummifying people is quite hard. So it's definitely not if you're like looking to save money, but if you're like, I'm going out in style, it's gonna be cool, look into that. It's pretty neat. They, you know, it's a process, but yeah, they will properly mummify you. People do it. The mushroom suit, yeah, everybody loves the mushroom suit. It was, for the people watching, it was this idea, I believe is it Luke Perry who passed away? Luke Perry from 90210. He actually did it. His daughter explained on Instagram for people that it was basically is this black full body suit. You look like a ninja, and somehow I don't understand the science of it. There's like bits of mushroom sewn in, and so the idea was that you would be buried, and then the mushrooms would come up, and you know they would feed off you because that's what mushrooms do. Unfortunately, since I wrote the book, she has gone out of business. So it was accurate at the time and it's no longer accurate, but everyone who reads the book wants to talk about it. So it's one of those things where I hope that for whatever reason, something about it not working, apparently, if they figure it out, someone will bring it back, because it seems like people are really interested in it.
I also find it very amazing that where was it in, I want to make sure I tell you the proper, a UK company will, you can have a Viking ship send off. You can be sent to Valhalla, which I think is pretty epic.
Well, it's what it is. It's a little tiny ship, and what you do is you put your ashes in it. Yeah, because the Viking send off thing unfortunately never happened in history. Viking ship, it was actually a burial thing. So when you hear about Sutton Hoo in England, that's a ship that was buried with the king in it and all his hoard. So the problem with the kind of cliche Viking, cremation essentially, is that you can't get a boat like that you light on fire hot enough to actually, you need a lot of heat to actually get rid of a human body. So if you ended up doing the kind of traditional, the boat goes away, it's got the person, and you shoot the arrow and it goes, what you're going to get is a partially burned body washing up on the shore a few days later. Nobody wants that. But so that, yeah, there is this company, and it is really adorable. It's a little like willow boat. And the idea is you put your cremains in it, in something that would burn. And so you send it off and you light it and it goes, and the whole boat will burn. And then what your cremains are in will burn, and then they'll go into the water. So it's basically you could just spread your ashes in the water, or you could do that. And it's really cool.
Definitely more self-sufficient than I could see that going awry. Something that you don't have to go into too deeply, just because it's, I don't know, people might have just eaten dinner, but the turning body art into fine art, the preserving the tattoos was mind-boggling to me.
Yeah, for me it's so natural to talk about this stuff, so I apologize. But I have tattoos. I know a lot of people who have tattoos that, they become a part of the person. A lot of people spend a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of pain, and it's real art. And so if you kind of have just I have one I just got in college, maybe not that one, but one that means something, what you can do is, human skin is leather. And so if you contact the right people, they will take the piece of skin that has the tattoo on it off and essentially turn it into leather, and it will still have the tattoo on it, and you can literally frame it and put it up on the wall. And I mean, at the end of the day, it's like, we do it, we wear leather, and we also keep people's ashes like on our mantelpiece in urns. So, it's really not, it's like maybe one more step, but it's not that weird when you really think about it. Yeah.
You're right. We have to make it a thing.
I'm a vegetarian, so to me it's the same as like doing it to a cow. I'm like, same thing.
Let's see here. I
just thought of this actually, because I also say in my book that and it's true, that you can take cremains and mix them in with tattoo ink, and then have a tattoo made. So now I'm thinking that you could have like generational, like you could get a tattoo with your parents' eyes or something, and then your tattoo could be removed. I just thought
what made me giggle throughout your book, you talk about like your arch nemesis, like, double checking, confirming that you're dead at your funeral. And then I thought it was funny when you can get some of your remains put into a bullet, and then they said that your then heir would then avenge you with that bullet with your arch nemesis.
Yeah, I'm not recommending that, but for hunting and stuff, apparently you can do that. You mix it in with basically cremains are they're totally safe, for like, if you can get them mixed in with tattoo ink, and there's no problem, they're completely safe. You can essentially do anything. When I was researching that cremain section, like what fun things can you do with cremains, I think in the book they had me edit it down quite significantly, and in the book I probably only put 1/10 of what I'd even found. It's like, if you can think of something you can just add a bit of dust to, they will do it with your cremains. Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
I was just looking at your celebrity burial hoards, like what people have been buried with. Can you touch upon some things that were really intriguing, some things that you didn't really, oh, really?
Yeah, I love this, and I actually want to. I'll read directly from one of them because it's so ridiculously long. Once I find it, here we go, page 60. But yeah, I think it's one of those things where if you are being full body buried in a casket, you know, bring stuff with you. You know, things that meant something to you. That you have plenty of room in there. So add some things. A lot of people take their cell phones now, which is actually really beautiful because we're never ever without them. And a lot of people will continue to pay the cell phone charges for their deceased loved ones, so they can like call and like hear their voicemail message, so you can hear their voice. That might be the only snippet of their voice that you have. And then also you can be like, hey, your favorite team won the Super Bowl. It's just like a feeling of connection with them, which I actually think is really great. But yeah, some people brought some really cool things. William S. Burroughs brought the 38 caliber revolver that he accidentally shot and killed his second wife with. Sandra West, who's just a socialite, she's not like a famous person, but she was buried in her 1964 Ferrari 330. So that, she had a lot of money. You can do what you want when you have that much money and you're just considered eccentric. Bob Marley, things like marijuana and a Bible for his Rastafarianism. But Tony Curtis has to be my favorite because I will literally read this out. No, this isn't even touching the surface of what he did. Among the dozens of items were a model of his car, his Navy medals, a pair of his grandson's baby shoes, stones he'd collected while traveling, a DVD of clips from his favorite films, his iPhone, 7 packets of Splenda, a single Percocet tablet, and his dog's ashes. And I mean, there was a lot more. That was just, those are kind of the standout ones. But how did they fit him in there? He must have a huge coffin.
So one thing that I talked about with friends, I know one of my friends who actually is covered head to toe, she wants to donate her body to a med school. And I saw that you have researched different things you can do if you do not choose the traditional burial path. Did you get to talk to those who ran these organizations?
No, I unfortunately no, but it is one of those things. Is we kind of hear horror stories in the news. A couple of years ago, there was a particularly big one, I think, with LA, where you have these kind of chop shops or whatever, and people are like, "Oh, this is what will happen to my body if I donate it to medical science." It is absolutely not, but that's one of the reasons that you need to kind of think about this beforehand if that's something you want to do. If we're talking about donating to like the Mayo Clinic, which does take full body donation, you just have to plan ahead. There's forms you have to fill out. They have to make sure you actually want to donate because at the end of the day, a human body is worth a lot of money. So you want to make sure that you're donating to somewhere that is absolutely legitimate, that, medical school, things like that. And then also a lot of people don't know, but once you can be an organ donor. If you want to then still donate your body, you can still donate organs first. So it's not a choice of one or the other. And then once you've basically been used for whatever they're using you for, sometimes it's students learning how to do a complex surgery, things like that, then any bit that is left, they can give back to your family, and they will actually usually cremate you for, like, they'll pay for it because you've donated your body, and then they'll take care of the cremation, and then it might be a little bit down the line, but your family will get those cremains back. So it's really kind of just, it's a way of kind of doing everything. You can donate your organs, you can help medical science, and your family will still have some sort of cremains to then do what they feel comfortable with. So yeah, it is.
Of that they would cremate you after they were done with it. I thought that was it after.
Yeah.
I guess would be a conversation. It would be a conversation you'd have to have with your family, because it would almost extend that mourning process. I think if all of a sudden you felt like you were moving forward, and then up shows the ashes at your door, so it's almost a gift to mourn again.
Yeah, and it's definitely a more complicated just way of giving, doing something with your body, disbursement, and in that you have to get your body to the place, and a lot of places will pay to get you there, to get your remains there if you die within a certain distance. So if you live outside, you know, in the same city as the Mayo Clinic or something like that, that is relatively easy. But if you're across the country and you don't have a place next to you that you want to donate to, then your family would be in charge of essentially getting you there. And that involves things, forms, is there a plane involved? How quickly can things be done? So it is one of those things where if it's something you feel passionate about, and I think it's a great thing to do, that you need to do it, you know, even if you don't think you're going to die tomorrow, if you want to do it, look into it now. There are forms, they have to make sure that you actually want to do this. They give you, I think they give you some sort of photo ID to keep in your wallet. So if something happens, you know, a car accident or something, the people who are getting you out, they'll know that this is what's going to happen with you, because there is kind of a time limit thing as well. You want to get there as soon as possible. So it's definitely something where it does require a lot of thought. It may require a little bit of money, but at the same time, funerals cost a lot of money. So if they're going to deal with the cremation for you, you know, maybe it evens out.
I'd like to think of myself as an environmental friendly person, which I'm sure everyone in the audience feels that way. And I didn't really know a lot about natural burials until I read your book, and I did some research. There are a few places in Connecticut. And can you touch upon that? And then I always thought prior to this that I wanted to be cremated, but I wasn't even thinking about the carbon footprint that creates. So would you be able to talk about the, you know, the ins and outs and, you know, what, I guess, in the scheme of things, if you put everything, lined everything up, what is the most environmental friendly way compared to the least amount?
Yeah, if we all live to you know, a great age, I think green burial is pretty much going to be standard. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be buried if you prefer something like cremation. There's something called aquamation or water cremation. They haven't really settled on a name yet, where they basically boil you like soup. And then they do, well, the other one is they burn you. It all sounds weird when you put it like that. But it, and then the bones are ground up, which is what you get back as cremains for cremation as well. So it ends up being the same thing. It's a little bit better for the environment. Cremation isn't too bad. It's basically like filling up an SUV and then just using all the petrol, all the gas. And so, I don't believe I just said petrol. My husband's English, sorry. He's probably downstairs laughing now. But yeah, so it's not too bad. It's essentially a tank of gas, a large tank of gas. So you don't have to feel too guilty about that. I always say that, you know, green burial is great, but also this is something that's incredibly important for you and for your family. And, you know, there are so many ways to try and be green, but we all make choices about what is going to be the most important thing for us. Like not everyone's vegetarian, you know, if everyone stops having children, you know, that'd be really green, but people don't make those choices. I would put how you want your remains dispersed as one of those things that you shouldn't sacrifice. If you do want to be cremated, it's really not that bad. Natural burial, though, is really great. And as you said, you have to look for places, at least right now, because your kind of standard memorial park cemetery is not going to do it. But there are locations now, they tend to be beautiful. They tend to be kind of in the woods and kind of natural, where they will wrap you in what is essentially like a shroud. And you are buried about 3.5 feet down, which is absolutely fine. Animals cannot smell you at that. It's a perfectly safe and healthy and wonderful distance down. And then that's where all the kind of healthy bacteria and microbes are, and they will break you down. So you really do the whole kind of Lion King circle of life thing, because you were buried in the kind of correct place and not with any embalming fluid or anything like that.
Yeah, when I really enjoyed that chapter with the Coral Reef burial. Never heard of that. And I'm intrigued.
There's so many. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really mind-boggling. And I feel, when do you, in your research, did you notice a time where all this stuff started happening? Because I can't remember hearing about this as a child. And I'm wondering when, you know, this started becoming a business model.
I think really things started changing when cremation started becoming the norm, which is a lot more recent than you would think. We are, being held prisoner in a way by the Victorians, who were very, very good at taking the funeral industry, taking death and just bending it to their iron will. And we are still in their grip now, and we're only just kind of coming out of it. And so they thought cremation was weird. It was like what pagans did, or like just people in weird places. But now we've accepted it. Now it's the most common way of dealing with remains in the US. It wasn't forever, basically. So it's only recently, I think 2011, 2012, that it went over that 50% mark. And I think since people started accepting cremation and it started becoming more common, then it was like, okay, if we've accepted this, we can accept other things. And then that ran into basically people becoming more open with talking about death in this last generation, and also with people wanting to be more environmentally friendly. And so they look into it. It's also a very big business. So it's one of those things where if you can get people interested in something, you can make a lot of money out of it. It's worth innovating for people. It's worth getting in there and interrupting the system. So it's one of those things where I think once you have cremains, once you've gotten people to accept they can be cremains, then you can do things like the Coral Reef, because what that is mixing your cremains with essentially cement, and you're molded into, you can be like a little statue or a little clamshell and things like that. And they put you, there's one off Miami, they put you down in a place where there used to be reefs, they died off. All the, the ecology, ecosystem is like ruined then, because the fish go away and things eat the fish go away. But they've shown, it's been long enough now that they know it actually does bring back fish populations. It brings back all the other, it really actually does make a difference. You're effectively making a coral reef for them out of just cement, but it's really meaningful, and it has this kind of sunken cemetery vibe to it. And if your family can scuba dive, mine cannot, they can literally go visit you. That is acceptable for people to go down and see where you are, like it's a cemetery. But you do have to be able to scuba dive.
I'll have to share that with my husband, because he likes scuba diving, and his dream is to, I don't know if he still wants this, but at one point we talked about how if he went before me, he would scatter his ashes through all his favorite places around the world. So then our daughter, Claire, who's making a ruckus over here, would be able to then visit those spots and feel that connection. So I think that's special.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I want to be cremated. Everyone asks like, okay, all these things now that you've researched, what do you want? And I'm boring. I feel some connection to cremation, the kind of phoenix rising from the ashes symbolism. But yeah, I definitely want part of my, as I said, my husband's English and I lived in England for a while, and I want part of my ashes, if I die in America, brought over there and spread in some places over there for sure.
Now I have to mention that I've heard through the grapevine, I feel like you mentioned it in the book, that a lot of people try to spread ashes at Disneyland. And is it elite? Like it's just not allowed on their park premises? I almost want just a little bit, just to
Yeah, a lot of people, because we've all met Disney people. You may be a Disney person. They are, they're serious about Disney, and a surprisingly lot amount of people try and get their ashes spread there, to the point that it's a problem. They have, my cousin was a cast member, I think is what they're called there, for years. And she said, yeah, we have actual, staff meetings where we're taught, what to do. They have a special vacuum that's like, I assume they have more than one, that's like for that. If they catch people doing it, they learn things that, what to look for if people are doing it. The most popular place apparently is the Haunted Mansion. So yeah, which I would be hard because it's in the dark, so I don't know how you catch them. But they will shut the ride down. Even again, nothing dangerous about cremains whatsoever. You get them all over you, be fine. But they will shut the rides down if they catch someone and get their little special vacuum out and go in. And yeah, people really, and yes, I don't think I'm not sure of the exact legality, like if it's more Disney as a private company being like, no, we're going to throw you out. but I do think you can be arrested if I'm getting that correct. I think you can be arrested and they will drag you out of the park in handcuffs. So,
I'm gonna put
people
this in
still
my
do
will
it,
now.
but yeah.
Like
Yeah.
to do this, go on an adventure. This is just phenomenal information. And again, this book kind of lightens the topic. It's fun and playful. So if this is a really hard topic for you to discuss with your family, anyone who's out there, this could be kind of a way to ease into the conversation, which I think is brilliant. I've mentioned these things with my parents, but we have to get more serious about that conversation as time moves forward. And it's nice to think about these things, because I might have this bless you, Claire, this vision in my head, but if I don't share it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, so many things. Like, talking to people and writing the book, the main complaint about funerals wasn't even they're depressing or whatever. It was like, I went to a funeral and it didn't reflect the person I knew at all, which is what you're going to get when it's thrown together really quickly. You're not necessarily going to have it in a location that meant anything to them. You might not have a eulogy that you feel addresses them, because you're really upset and you're trying to write a eulogy or you're trying to write an obituary. It's terrible that we do this to people. I say, like, parents say that they would take a bullet for their child, and I absolutely believe them, but they won't talk about what happens after they take the bullet for their child. It's like, okay, if I do take a bullet for you, then you're going to have to figure it all out. And then I'm like, that's, talk to your kids. And we have an aging generation right now. And so this is the perfect time. People our age, we do have the parents who are aging. And then that allows us to also think about it ourselves for the next generation. So it's definitely, I know that it's a book, so there's limitations. There are things that I recommend in the book you should go further with, particularly when it comes to things like, there are local laws on like so many things. So I can only be so specific about what kind of legal things you need to look into. I can only be so specific on like your will or your passwords for the computer, things like that. So filling out the book is great. And I really, really hope everyone does it. But I also really hope that it does spark those conversations and it does allow people to take that next step and be like, okay, here, family, here's where I'm going to put all my passwords. And I am going to go see a lawyer and make a will. Yeah.
So what would you recommend? So for a family who is having trouble approaching this conversation, where would you start?
Yeah, it's really hard because it's such a, it so depends on the person. And I always say, like, you know your loved ones. It may be you have a loved one where you can literally buy this book for them for Christmas and be like, here, this is why I bought it for you. It might be something you have to bring up really, really gradually. I do find that as people get older, though, they do seem to be more open to talking about it, because it does, apparently, you do kind of recognize that this is a thing that is going to happen and your time is running out. And so when you have people that are a little bit older, I think it's a little bit easier. If you're trying to talk to someone who, I have a review on Goodreads, 3 stars, and it's from a 22-year-old, and she's like, maybe I was too young. And I'm like, okay, I understand that. Some people are like, I'm gonna live forever, it's fine. So yeah, but the humor aspect of it, you can approach it from numerous ways. I think if you plan ahead, there's the ability to save money, because a lot of places will let you pay. You can usually do it through your insurance policy. You pay a certain amount, and that will be used at today's prices. And just like everything else, funerals go up huge every year. So if you have the money you want to invest in it now, you can save money. So if you have someone who cares about finances, that's a great way of talking about it. If you have someone who has a weird sense of humor, seriously, just give them the book, they'll be fine. If you have someone where they will feel that kind of maybe guilt over leaving you or whatever, it's like, this is going to make my life easier. Like, I want to be able to just mourn you. So there's so many ways to approach it. I tend to, everyone in my life is a control freak. So I say, this allows you to have the send off that you want instead of what I decide for you. Like you get to have that control over your death. Yeah, so it really depends on the person, but there are a lot of ins, and it doesn't have to be this kind of like, okay, we need to have a talk. We're going to sit down and I'm going to hold your hand and look you in the eyes and say, I'm going to miss you more than anything. But okay, we need, like, it can be a lighthearted, fun thing to talk about. It really can. Because in a way, it's kind of ridiculous. Like, we're alive now and that's all we know. And then one day we're not going to be alive. And we're like, weird things happen to our body. And it's like a bizarre thing when you think about it. And just like anything else that's just kind of ridiculous, you can have fun with it. You won't be here at the end of the day, so have fun with it.
Speaking of having fun with it, I enjoyed the little blurb about how a gentleman recorded his voice and had it play. Well, I think he was being lowered, the casket was being lowered. So all his, I think his loved ones, like close loved ones, were in on it. But he was shouting like, "What's happening? It's dark in here. Get me out!" But I'm just imagining what my initial reaction would be if I heard that at a funeral.
Yeah, apparently, like when I read that, it was a gentleman in Ireland, and apparently he'd been sick, I think maybe heart disease or something, but he knew that it was coming, so he was able to plan with his daughter. I was happy that she knew, because I felt of all the people they might be most affected. But yeah, it was I don't exactly remember anymore if it was a thing in the casket or if she played something on her phone, but yeah, it was him recorded before he died saying, "Yeah, it's dark in here, what's going on, let me out, help." And you know, for a lot of people, myself included, I'm like, I would not appreciate that as a joke, but apparently for him it was very him. Everyone after that initial they knew it was a joke. Like, I would be sitting here going, "Oh my god, they're in a casket, how is this possible?" Like, I would believe it, but apparently it really fit with his personality. So that's, yeah, it's amazing. You can be creative, you can have fun, you can yeah, it's incredible. It makes me really happy that we are finally moving on from this. Everything has to be dour, everything has to be black, everything has to be in a church, everything has to be, you know, that the Victorians did so well. We can put our own stamp on it for a generation, for sure.
I think that's brilliant. I'm trying to think. I feel like I'm a funny person, and I'd like to have some kind of, last laugh in there. So we have a question. Someone wanted to know, with the recent space flights of Bezos and Branson, do you see space burials as becoming a business industry? Maybe they already exist.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's something that's already happening, and has been for probably about 20 years, 25 years. There's been different companies, some have come and gone, but there are more than one active company in Europe, in America right now, where you can do different varieties of space travel. It essentially depends on how much money you're willing to pay, and what your goal is. So right now you can do something where I forget their exact term. It was basically like a symbolic amount of your ashes. It's not like they're taking 2 pounds of human cremains up into space, because that costs a lot of money. But they put a symbolic amount of your ashes on this little spacecraft thing and the rocket, and they launch you, and you do essentially what Bezos and Branson did. You go to the edge of space, just beyond the edge of space. I believe one of the companies will put a camera on. And then also it has a GPS tracker. So you actually, you just go to the edge of space and you come back, and then your cremains that were sent to space can be returned to your family. And so then it's like, oh, you had a little bit of your cremains go to space and now we have them, and that's really cool. So that's kind of the most realistic for a lot of people. It's the most common, it's the most just wallet friendly, and it's pretty cool. Then there are ones where they will get your, again, symbolic amount of cremains on the moon, which is pretty amazing. There are ones where they will put them into orbit around the Earth, and then, so you don't get these back in that case, because it orbits the Earth a few times, and then slowly, because of gravity, it falls down and then it burns up, and you're basically like a meteor. So that's really cool. And then there is a space flight planned by one company. I believe it's for next year, for 2023. And, limited space and all of these things, very expensive. But the idea is that they will send a craft out that'll have, I forget, like 100, 500 people, again, symbolic amount of cremains, and they'll just go and they'll just keep going. So I'm not a space person. I don't know a lot. So anything I just said that made no sense, but that's essentially the idea. You can go to space. There are people, if you drop dead in the middle of this webinar, there are people who will do it for you now. But yeah, it just depends on kind of what thing you want. And I think it will get bigger. I think it's definitely one of those things like, yeah, I could see all those billionaires being like, oh, I've decided that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my own craft and then send my ashes all out into space and those kind of things. And it's already been done famously with some people from Star Trek. Quite a few of them have done, and they died a while ago, have done this where they've either done the orbit or out into space, or I think Scotty, I think he may be on the moon. I think a little bit of him is on the moon. So yeah, space people are really into space right now. It's a cool thing.
I'm intrigued by the moon. I who knows how much that costs. Oof. Someone wanted to know, where are the green areas where green burials occur? Are they public land or private land?
Yeah, so they're private land. They are essentially a cemetery, just not what we think of as a standard cemetery. But it is definitely private. I don't know of any places that are public in the sense of like it's just a park and you get there and you don't know that there are people who are buried there. But there are, in fact, I would say they're especially private because from what I understand from a funeral director, you can't walk around green burial areas because there is no coffin, and because they're not buried, people are not buried as far down as in a normal cemetery, the ground will dip. And so when things are happening, and so you can't walk around in them because you don't want to put your foot through that. That would not be great. So yeah, they are private, even more so than a cemetery, where with a regular cemetery you can walk and go see your relative anytime you want. With this, from afar, but it's really pretty and beautiful. And you can also have one. I would say, as we know unfortunately from Native Americans, just because you were buried somewhere doesn't mean you're going to stay there. It doesn't mean someone's going to respect the fact that this is a burial ground. But there are even fewer than places where you can be naturally buried are places that are basically conservation areas. And there is more of a guarantee in that case that area is going to stay wild, is going to stay with the plants and everything. Again, I don't know the legality around that, but I do know there is kind of two levels that you can look into.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with safety, because I think it's a cool idea, but then, I would want to visit someone, and obviously you can visit anyone, anywhere, because, it depends on how you view things, but I don't know, sometimes you want that physical space to mourn. Yeah. Someone wanted to know, it's another green burial question. I don't know if you know the answer. Do you have to keep on paying for the green burial even after the service? Meaning, are you renting the land where you end up?
I mean, that's one of those things that will absolutely depend on the location. From my research, when it comes to land, you're essentially paying up front, because with burial, that tends to be the most expensive thing, other than a casket. But if you're having a green burial, you don't have that. But yeah, you do pay for land, and that is one of those things where they can't like unbury you, so they do want that paid for. But again, you would have to contact, some places will let you do payment plans. Again, you can do this insurance thing where you literally have this fund. There's a lot of options. The thing that you usually have to continue paying for in a regular cemetery is upkeep. So you end up paying basically a yearly fee to say that there is going to be a person that comes if you can't come, and it's going to keep the place nice, which of course you want to do. And with natural burials, that's not as much of an issue, because the whole idea is there's going to be weeds and there's going to be plants and there's going to be flowers, and you're not going to be able to tell that a person has been buried there. So as far as I know, there aren't places that make you pay that kind of fee continually. But when it comes to the land, yeah, you're pretty much usually going to be paying for it up front. But again, look into it, because the rules vary everywhere.
And someone in the chat wanted to know, which I think you mentioned in your book, can you make a diamond out of your remains?
Yeah, my mother wants that. Yeah. I remember when I learned that years ago. I think I learned that in college. They've been doing it a while. She was like, that's it. That's what I'm getting. But they don't need too much of you. There's actually a place here in Austin that's kind of like a startup that's doing it, and it does what you were talking about before with like donating your body. Does it extend the mourning? It takes quite a while. It takes, I believe the place in Austin takes about 6 to 9 months. And they, in fact, maybe more like 9 to 10. And they talk about, working with you the whole time and kind of being in touch with you, and, having it be a whole process. So it's not a quick thing, but if it is something that you think is cool, I think it's amazing. I'd be very happy to wear it.
I'm imagining a scenario where someone proposes, look, this is grandmother's ring. Oh, grandma wore this. No, it's actually grandma.
Yeah. Again, it's with cremains, it tends to be a symbolic amount. It's the same thing. Some people feel that it's a little bit sketchy, the diamond thing, because you do get, at the end of the day, you are going to get a lab grown diamond. And on a like molecular level, a lab grown diamond is the same thing as a real diamond. So you are getting a real diamond, but you don't know necessarily how much they use. I think the more cremains they use, the bluer the diamond is. So you're not going to be getting like some sort of, something you can go to the mall and buy that's white and beautiful. It is quite expensive, so you're paying a lot more for the size of a diamond than you would, again, going to a jewelry store. So like the kind of ones, once they get where you can really kind of see them, can get pretty pricey. So there's a lot to it, but it is definitely something you can do, understanding that the whole diamond is not your loved one. It's a lot of lab carbon that they've added to a little bit of cremains. But I think it's great, and if my mother wants it done, I'm happy. I think it's absolutely fabulous.
Now, someone wanted to know what's your opinion on prepaid funerals?
I think they are a great idea. One of the things that I would say absolutely killed me, and that's not appropriate, that I found really painful, especially during the past 18 months, is all the GoFundMes for funerals. And I know that a lot of people, probably most people, don't have extra cash lying around to do all the prepaid things. But if you do, it's such a help, because funerals are one of those things where there are ways of doing it cheaper, but even the cheapest ways are not cheap. I was talking to a funeral director a couple of weeks ago, and she was saying, they have a term for it. It's basically just the standard cremation, like the cheapest possible way of doing cremation, not giving you back in an urn, basically a box, little cardboard box thing, and then you just take those home. Even that, you're talking like $2,000 to $3,000. So there really isn't a way to do it on a budget, to do it cheaply. And because it gets more and more expensive every year, it's something where if you do prepay now, she was explaining to me there are 2 different ways of prepaying, and I, of course, forgot the names. But there's one where you prepay and that's it. That's what you're paying. That's the amount. And so if you die 30 years from now, you've saved a ton of money, or your next of kin has. But there's another one where you're putting money in, but at the time you die, whoever's paying for your funeral will have to pay the difference to the current prices. So you definitely need to check, if you're going to do that you're doing the one where it is at today's prices. So I think they're great.
Is that through like health insurance? Like how?
Yeah, it tends to be.
How would you research this?
Yeah, it tends to be through an insurance company. There are okay, so it depends on where you are. There are banks that will do it. There are but I have been told that it's better to go through insurance than to go through banks. don't know why, but that's just what I've been told. And there are, of course, especially if you live in kind of a smaller community, a lot of times a local funeral home will let you do it as well if you contact them directly. Obviously, you want everything in writing and all of that. But yeah, it's look into it through your, like, contact your insurance company, and they will probably have it's just not health insurance, like home insurance, things like that. They'll probably have an option. And then just ask them to make sure that if you put in money now, that's what you end up paying at the end of the day.
Oh, this is phenomenal. I had no idea. This is going to be one of our topics in the new year. Thank you. So we have a few more questions. I know we're getting close to the hour. So someone mentioned that their mother wanted to be donated to science, and she said she believes the only cost was to get the death certificate for that.
Yeah, there's death certificate. It again depends. There are, I would even say, often transportation costs. Again, it depends. I know that for a lot of places, if you die within 100 miles, that tends to kind of be the number for them. If you die within 100 miles, they will transport you for free. But again, if it's something where it's going to be like a plane ride, they may either make you pay up front, or you may have to pay those to pay that cost yourself. Absolutely depends. It's one of those things that you have to look into, because it will depend on the organization. It will depend on where they're located. Yeah, it's one of the frustrating things about this is that there aren't kind of standards that are either even full states a lot of times, and definitely not through countries, definitely not through the entire US. So I hate to be like, do your own research, but at the end of the day, you have to kind of, if she wants to be donated, then it has to go past I want to be donated. It has to go into detail.
So someone wanted to know, do you have any ideas of what you can do with ashes of someone who already has been deceased?
So, I mean, I don't know if that means we're talking for like they've been deceased for a long time, or they've just been deceased and you just got their ashes. Again, you can think of it as sand. You can think of it as of anything that it's just grit, essentially. It's bones that have been very hot and then they are ground up, and so it's completely safe, other than when a place like Disneyland tells you can't do it there. You can do pretty much I say pretty much a lot of places do not want you spreading ashes. But again, I was talking to a funeral director, and she was like, so legally, like, I think in her state, she's like, you're not allowed to spread ashes anywhere, but I would never stop a family from spreading ashes. So it's one of those things where if you can get away with it, that's fine. I think the tattoo thing is great. I think the diamond thing is great. I think there are people who will do paintings, or if you're artistic, you can do your own paintings. You can mix it into paint, make a painting in honor of the person. Obviously spreading, there's so many things you can do. And it just boggles the mind. It really does. The bullet thing that you mentioned, there are so many other art things you can do. You can put them in clay for pottery. It honestly never ends. But it's really cool because there are some artists who will do like portraits of the person with their ashes in the paint. And I think that's a really cool idea. That's
really cool. Man, I think if you could think of something, it probably exists for one of these ways. Yeah. Someone was curious if you knew how long the cost for upkeep for a regular cemetery lasts. Is it decades?
Yeah, I think it's, again, depends.
Okay.
It depends on the cemetery. But from just what I've seen, it tends to be, I've seen such a variety. I've seen kind of for your lifetime. I've seen kind of 50 years. It really, really, really depends, because obviously we've all been to a cemetery where you see the graves that have not been upkept. So it's not like in perpetuity, like your kids and their kids are going to have to pay for it. But I feel like the most I've seen was kind of a 50-year. And then I have seen things where it's like, okay, you're going to pay kind of in perpetuity, which I assume just means until you die. But that also seems kind of unenforceable if you move away or whatever. But yeah, it's one of those that totally depends on the cemetery, unfortunately. Okay, so I would like to know if Kathy can answer my question on mixed religious burial, Catholic cemetery for both Catholic and Jewish double stone. So the issue there, and this is not something I'm an expert on, but the immediate issue that comes to mind is that if you want to be buried a traditional Jewish way, which is essentially green burial, where you're buried in a shroud, you're buried very quickly, a Catholic cemetery may not be willing to do that. Again, it's one of those things. Ask the church. Maybe, if you go to the church, if your family goes to the church, they might be more open. But a standard Catholic cemetery is probably going to want a casket. They may want embalming. They may want. They almost certainly will want the kind of case that is put around the coffin. So that is the kind of thought that comes to mind. If you're talking traditional Jewish burial in a Catholic cemetery, they may not be able to do that just logistically, which is very unfortunate. But again, I'm not an expert on that. That's just the first thing that jumps out to my mind. Sorry to be brief. I know we have to go. Are you allowed to scatter ashes in the water like Long Island Sound? Yeah, water tends to be much easier to do than land. I know in Seattle, there is a company, at least one company, where they'll take your family out on a boat into whatever's in Seattle, the water around Seattle, and you can, you have a little party on the boat and you throw them out and it's like a little funeral on the boat. Yeah, so there tends to be a lot less rules around water, which is nice than Disneyland. Looking over here, what's my opinion about funerals? I think they're great. My mom wanted to be doing science. Local funeral homes are happy for you to pre-plan. The money is in escrow. Thank you. Those are the words that I need to know. I am not a lawyer. I don't know any of the words. Med schools need cadavers. They generally don't cross state lines. There, this person knows all the things. There you go. Don't cross state lines. Yeah, I think that was everybody. I'm sorry to hurry on those last ones, but I hope I got everybody.
I think I missed a part in your book, but something about a funeral cake. Can you just close out with that funeral cake?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if I have time to grab this, but yeah, I thought I made it up, the funeral cake thing. I did it as a joke, and I just thought, I don't remember. I made a joke about having a cake, and then I was like, okay, I'm going to have a callback to that later, and that'll just be funny because it's ridiculous to have a funeral cake. Well, I have a collection of death ephemera because I'm weird. And I decided to randomly search for ones that said funeral cake. And so this guy, you probably can't see it, but he has funeral cake listed as one of the things he will do. And this is 1897. So yeah, I thought I was making a joke, but apparently funeral cakes were actually a thing at one point, at least for James Riddle.
It's been just phenomenal and really it's such a hard topic to talk about. And this really, it makes you smile, makes you laugh when you think about the end. And I appreciate you bringing that, mindfulness to this topic.
Yeah, it's fun. And it is one of those things where I went into this because it scared me. Terrified me. And now, it's 20 years later, but it's, I'm sitting here talking about it. I've written 2 books about it. So it is one of those things where even if it scares you, if you start looking into it, you start dealing with it, it does give you that feeling of control over it. And you can be like, okay, it sucks. No one wants to die, but it's going to happen. And I can plan, I can deal with it. I can, try and be as prepared as possible. So it sucks a little less than it would.
Thank you so much, Kathy, for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
Wonderful. I'm so happy. Have a great night, everyone. I'm sure Claire's going to pass out right after this.
Bye, Claire.
Sweet dreams. Thank you. Have a great evening.